gentlemen, we're opening up a device and you should type in Kahoot and join using that code. So you put the code in, make a nickname for yourself, and we can start. Just a 5-question. We have prizes, and then we'll test your knowledge about Australia and in the Australian tertiary scene. Any more players? You're welcome to keep. Is anyone trying to get in? Hands up if you're trying to log on. Oh, we've got six now. Okay, shall we get started? And those of you that are around can watch what happens. So it's a very basic Kahoot. And the questions are going to be on the board. And on your screen, you're going to have 4 areas of answer. And you press the button. You have to be quick off the mark to actually make a start. So are you ready? How many public universities are there in Australia? You've got the answers on your screen and you press onto your screen one of those. You've got 9 seconds. Okay, and we'll go to the next one. So Belinda, you're in the lead. Belinda should be in the lead. To be classed as a domestic student for study purposes. Should you be just an Australian citizen? A person from a country excluding Australia? 5 seconds, and then the results will be revealed. Okay. Again, Belinda. No, you can stay. But maybe we could not get the prizes. I don't think you'll be. No. So we'll give it to the next person. Okay. Now, Southern Cross University is a member of which Australian university network? Is it the Group of 8, the Regional Universities Network, the Australian Technology Network, or the Innovative Research Universities? And my apologies, I'm not sure if I've credited this, Don, to the picture, but I didn't think you'd mind.
Sorry, this is Southern Cross University. 2 times, that's good. I'm very happy with the question.
And Belinda. James, where's James? He's doing very well. Okay. How does the application process for Australia differ from the process for the USA or the UK? There's your answers. Choose one. You've got 17 seconds. So you need only grades or an ATAR. And they can be on a transcript, obviously, for some of the... so I could have added that, but you only get a very short time to put the answers up, a number of words on this Kahoot. So again, we have a winner in Belinda, it's followed by James. Where's Pinky? Now, Pinky, you would have to come in first because I reckon these two be disqualified by their roles. So, Don, I'm going to ask you to present the prize to Pinky. Yes, almost.
They're in Australia. This is the Australia prize. And because Pinky was the high, she's already seen that and she can do that. It's got pictures of Australia, but it's got some beaches and it's a place called the Gold Coast.
Okay, so I'm Rhonda Vink. Many of you have met me already, and I have the very big privilege of leading this team of Australian delegates. We feel a bit sort of out of it in a way. There's so many US people here at the conference, but we're going to do our best today to promote Australia as a destination. It's interesting, we had the conversation before. I'm a Kiwi, but very much in favour of Australian universities, having been a counsellor at the Australian School in Singapore for 13 years now. I'm going to hand over to Tom. Tom Calder is the Trade Commissioner here in Mumbai, and you can read his full bio in the book. Sorry. He has responsibilities for all of Southeast Asia, including India, and it's a role that's wide and varied, and of course one of the main aspects is to promote Australia. And today we're going to present Future Unlimited.
Yeah.
Sorry,
just to make sure you're all awake now.
Yeah, we've got everyone. An Australian education and a global career. So I'm going to hand over to Tom to do the first part, and then I'll introduce the other speakers to you. Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Rhonda. I'll just use this one, that's fine. Welcome to Australia, everyone. Nice to see you all here this morning. Hopefully it wasn't a late night or a too early morning today. As Rhonda said, my name's Tom Calder. I work for the Australian Trade Commission as part of the consulate here in Mumbai. I've been in India for 5.5 years now, 4 of those in New Delhi and 18 months here in Mumbai. So I think I know maybe 1% about India, so I'm always still learning. And I guess the purpose of today's session is also to provide some insight and information on this amazing place that we come from called Australia. So I'll also start off with a bit of a competition. Can anyone point out the odd one out up there on the screen and the reasons for that? That is a picture of me with Mr. Modi as well. Sorry, very self-indulgent, but I just wanted to chuck that in there. Okay, there's no right answer, but perhaps the most amusing one I've had recently was someone said that the bottom left-hand picture was the odd one out because Australia doesn't actually win any more sporting events, and we've gone terribly bad at that. So some iconic images up there. Obviously, hopefully you all know that that's a koala. And again, the one I wanted to put up there with Mr. Modi is really, I guess, just a snapshot of Australia's interest in India. We feel it's broadening, it's deepening. We've got a long way to go, but we really think it's on a positive footing now. We're not just relevant to each other through cricket. That has been true of some time, but now we think it's advancing. So I just wanted to run you through some quick facts about Australia, and I won't dwell on these because I've only got 8 minutes, I think, Rhonda. Very multicultural society, and I guess how this relates to your students, and particularly when you look at the other 3 points there, it's quite a welcoming place for international students. Very diverse experiences, 500,000 international students at any one point in time studying in Australia, so we're very well geared towards welcoming your students and looking after them as well. And again, the depth of diversity and the range of experiences and international people that they'll meet while they're there, not just Australians, is quite broad. That's a bit about our economy. We've gone 25 years now, I think, without a recession, so a bit of a standout in the global perspective, and it hopefully ties in nicely with India, given your growth trajectory. How that relates again to students, with such a strong economy, we feel there's great opportunities for students to get some work experience while they study. That's relatively easy for all international students to do. And again, our post-study work visas are quite flexible and quite open, but you can have a chat to some of the university reps in the room about that process. Again, with such a strong economy, we feel there's great opportunity for Indian students to get some post-study work experience and some professional experience. And increasingly, I think that's really important for students globally these days. And it may not be just in Australia. It may be starting out in Australia, but with a view to going further afield. And just tapping into that, our geographic location in the Asia-Pacific region is quite enmeshed with South and East Asia, and increasingly the Middle East as well. That's really where the global growth is going to come from, Asia and Africa over the next 30, 40 years. The US may uptick here and there. Europe's going through a bit of a slowdown. So again, for your students, regardless of which area of study they're doing, the connections they're going to make and the exposure to some of these economies, we feel is second to none. A high percentage of our international students are from these North Asian, Southeast Asian markets as well. So whether you're going into business, you're going into engineering, IT, or even the social sciences, these sort of influences I think are quite critical for young adults. Just some quick snapshots that you might not know about Australia. We're very proud of some of the innovation we do and the R&D at our universities. The black box was an Australian invention. Hopefully none of you ever need to use that or have need of that. Just so you feel safe. That's an Australian invention. Google Maps, I use this all the time in India because I have no idea where I'm going. This is quite a nifty tool for me. Wi-Fi, I'm sure this drives you crazy with your students and their smartphones and tablets. I know it does for me as a parent of young kids, but when you consider a world without Wi-Fi, it's almost unimaginable now. So Australia had a very big part in developing this technology. The bionic ear, it's made a big difference in a lot of people's lives around the world. And the polymer banknote. Around 30-odd countries using this technology now, and we're still looking to see whether we could bring this into India. Some of your 10 rupee notes get a bit ratty at times in your wallet, so the polymer tends to have a bit more of a longer shelf life. So studying in Australia, that's just a broad snapshot of the growth trends. You know, it's really going from strength to strength. It's a growth industry for Australia. An overview of where our universities are located, and primarily on the east coast of Australia. That was the first part of Australia that was settled, so these institutions initially were established there, but it's grown. So tremendous variation in terms of where students can study. We would also encourage students not to look at just the major metros. There's a wealth of experiences outside the major cities of Australia. Just as we say to Australian companies and people coming in here, India is not all about Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore and Chennai, and apologies to those of you who are from those cities. The second tier cities in India offer different experiences and different opportunities as well, and we think that's true of Australia also. I'm sure you probably all know these names, and it's just a little bit of an exercise that I'd like to do. Very well-known universities, I'm sure some of your students have gone or are aspiring to go to these, and perhaps the parents of your students are hoping their kids will go as well. Just in terms of where Australian institutions rank, these are using the Times Higher Education rankings for last year. So as you can see, the best of our institutions stack up pretty well against some of those really strong global brand names. And one thing I've noticed in my 5.5 years here is that the extent of the quality of Australian education is not well known, and the brand names aren't really that well known either. Overall, taking out the individual rankings as well, we've only got 39 institutions in Australia, but 7 of those are ranked in the top 100 and 5 in the top 50. So when you consider that as a percentage of excellence overall, it's very, very high. And I'm not sure too many other countries outside of Singapore, which is quite a small country, can lay claim to that. And again, it's not just about the institutional rankings, it's also about the subjects and the disciplines that your students will be studying. Very brief snapshot of some areas there, but most of the universities here in this room will have their own specialities and will probably rank in the top 10, 20 for various subjects as well. So the institutional rankings at a top level are a pretty blunt instrument. I think for your students and your parents, you're really having to narrow down and drill down a bit deeper into discipline areas to understand where your universities and institutions actually rank on their subjects as well. Future careers. Most of your students will hopefully have an eye on this as soon as they choose their course and go through their course. The slogan for Australian education marketing and promotion is a future unlimited, and it's really about using Australian education as a way to access global opportunities. So I'd just like to show you a quick story, video, hopefully this plays, of a young Indian guy who's a good friend of mine now, who's chosen a different path and has had a different journey to get to Australia. I think we've got some technical issues there with that sound. Sorry for that. Utam's not studying IT, by the way, so don't take that out on me. Look, probably not much point in carrying on that video. I'll give you some background. Awesome Kumar was a young man that entered an Australian competition, postcard competition, around 50,000 entries from around the world. He was a young man that got a scholarship to study at IIT Delhi. A self-taught kid, if you like, growing up in a small village in Haryana. managed to get a scholarship to IIT Delhi, which is no mean feat. Then off the back of winning this competition, he got a scholarship to a university in Sydney to study materials engineering. He's done his master's there, and he's now got a full scholarship to do a PhD in materials engineering in Australia. So again, a guy that's chosen a slightly different career path, but his whole rationale for it and why he won that competition is that he sees a great future in this materials space, but also the recycling of materials, how to reuse those, reduce pollution. So what I always say to kids is you always got to have an eye on the future. Some of the jobs, as you would know, that your students will be doing in 15 years don't exist anymore. So how do you get ahead of that curve? How do you teach skills to these students? How do you prepare them for that world they're going into? And these points just back up really that I guess rationale is it's moving beyond generic business courses now. As a young man or woman, you're not just competing in India. You're not just competing in Australia, you're competing on a global stage. So how do you really stand out from all those other talented young men and women looking for jobs in any field as well? Again, you need to choose universities and institutions that offer diversity and make well-rounded students, and that's true of any institution globally. And I think, again, increasingly important is the ability to work across cultures and familiarity with different cultures, particularly the Asian cultures as well. That's where the future of the world really is, in our region as well. And if you don't want your kids to move too far away from home, I think their future is going to be in this Asia-Pacific region. So again, to back up my earlier point, we feel that studying in Australia really does give you an exposure to a lot of those different Asian cultures and mindsets. Just a quick plug for our schools competition that we run. It's a video competition. Third year this year we'll be running it. The winning teams, and we had 4 winning teams last year, get to go down to Australia for a week, hosted by one of our university sponsors. It's around specific topics and themes. And that gives you a bit of an overview there. So we had some very interesting specialisations proposed last year: mechatronics, big data, marine science and creative animation. And I think, Chintan, we had around 100 entries for each category. Yeah. So around 1,000 schools in India took up the opportunity to get involved with this, and we had around half of those then enter videos for that. As I said, the 4 winning teams got to travel down to Australia, hosted by these universities, and I think a positive experience for them overall. I think that's me right on time, hopefully, Rhonda. But just to close it off, thanks for coming here today. Look, and we'd really, in any way that we can, just help you or your students or your parents or your principals or counsellors or teachers discover that future unlimited. Thank you.
So my part, I'll just get the escape. Mine starts with another map of Australia, and my part in this is just to do process. So of all the team here, I'm a counsellor, as I said before, and I work with students from all different countries and help them into Australia. So I have domestic students on board in my school just as much as I have the international students. And like many of you out there, we have the issue of what is the actual process, and the parents are very, very keen to know that. So there are 3, I'll just go through the different slides as I've got them, and then feel free at the end to see me if you want any more specific details. So I put that one in there just to confirm for you from the Kahoot. There are 38 public universities and 3 private universities. And like Tom said, they're mainly scattered onto the far side. Western Australia, the concept of Western Australia is very similar to a Melbourne. So we've got from a US type of curriculum to a very, very much more vocationally centred university experience, and all of the different types in between. And then within that, we've got the different groups of universities, and I put that into the Kahoot as well. So many of you, if you are brand conscious, will be aware of the Group of 8, and very often they're referred to as the Group of 8 plus 1. The plus 1 is Macquarie University, and that's a university located in Sydney, and we have a representative from there today. The Group of 8 are self-branded. They're from a research background, okay, and many of them are reflected in the statistics that Tom gave before. But there are other university networks as well that serve Australian students and international students particularly well. Some of those are the Australian Technology Network. We've got UTS, RMIT, anything of that named like that will come from a technology background. And many of them have got enter scores that are very, very comparable with university in the group of 8 as well. And then we've got the regional universities, which do an amazing job in the teacher quality and in taking students in and looking after them very well and providing some wonderful courses for the students and giving them, in a way, like Tom was saying, a wonderful experience, which is very, very much less of being involved in a big city. Okay, but very innovative themselves in what they do. And then we've got the innovative research universities as well. The Australian education system is often a bit of a way to navigate. Most degrees, in a bachelor degree is a 4-year degree now, but we start with a generalist degree, and especially if you're going to somewhere like Melbourne or Western Australia, you can exit after 3 years with a general degree, but to get that extra professional level and layer, you would need to do the 4 years. Okay? And of course there's still a bit of a myth around the timing because it depends on the students and how much they access, or whether they access the course through time, whether they make a shift in their decisions about what they want to do, whether they want to add on. And just to capitalise on one of Tom's points, one of the things that the universities are doing now are allowing the students to do an add-on with a language diploma, for example. Many of the universities have got that option, so they can actually broaden out. So it's very hard to say you will be done and dusted in 3 years. It could be a slightly longer, or we can actually also accelerate if the papers that the students want to do are on in the summer programs as well. So a bachelor degree with honours, 3 to 4 years. There are diploma options available, and I think if you'd been to the pathway programs, you would have seen some of the very, very good options that are available there. So this slide will also be, this is the Melbourne one that I've got up. So this is outlining the Melbourne curriculum specifically and how you can go in to their program, but there are the pathway options, which I should have pointed out in the previous slide, and they can be really good segues for students who just need that extra leg up or need a smaller environment and a lot more supported. I often recommend them for students, regardless of whether they get an enter score to get into a bigger university. If they're a younger student, if they've just turned 18, for example, and of course that's the age that they can go down to Australia, because they get a bit more scaffolded into that university experience of being completely on a big campus and self-directing. Okay, so the application process. And this is the one that becomes really tricky because Australia doesn't have a one-stop shop. You've got the different states. And what complicates things are that the students need to apply. They can apply in 3 different ways. Okay? So we've got a direct to university. For an international student, they can go direct to the university. And the visa application is very doable. In fact, in many ways, it's easier to do than UK, US. I mean, with getting the timing right for the US and going through things. The thing that you do need to advise the students is that they get their IELTS or TOEFL. That's a must. Because not so much if the students are studying an IB program and or a program where they can actually prove their English to the university, but you've got left hand, right hand, you've got the visa part of it, and you've also got the school part. And so it's wise to actually do the language. And I always tell my students, it helps anyway. It is another test, but it is another area where you can, again, reaffirm and prove that you are at a very good level for English. So it's a reasonable thing to do. So you've got a direct entry. You've got the Australian University Admission Centres, which are available to students as well. And each one of them is moving to help and assist the international students in a good way. So, for example, the New South Wales now has UAC International, and I've bought only one book, sorry, in my flight bag, but you can access this online at UAC, and the students can actually use it really well and go direct to the universities in New South Wales. When I talk about the different ones, you've got UAC for New South Wales, QTAC for Queensland, VTAC for Victoria, SATAC for South Australia, TISC, don't ask me why, TISC is Western Australia, and we've got UTAS up there because Tasmanian University stands alone, and it links in with the maritime, the school for anything to do with the sea, and it's a wonderful, wonderful institution, well backed by the government, and I particularly have had students do very, very well down in that school. So that's a direct entry, although UTAS does get into the VTAC book as well. Okay, but it sort of stands alone. And then the open universities I put up there because when you're talking about prerequisites, and they're all listed in these books, the prerequisites can often, be related to mathematics, of course, and mainly at the moment, if you look in the book, most of the prerequisites centre around just English, and they have what's called assumed knowledge. Okay, now, I always say to the students, if they're assuming it, then they're really, really going to be pitching it at that level, so it's probably much, much better if you do it. However, some of the courses race through, as you know, and so you can go in and do a segue at the end of the year using the open learning or go into a bridging program, and most of the universities have those available as well. Okay, so you could actually get a score, so the students would choose whether they're going to go for a score to get into a course or whether they're going to go in to get the exact subjects that they need. So that's why I've put that one up there. So, as I said, these are the books. For domestic, if you've got domestic students, they've got access to these books, and everything's online. It's just that my students do the New South Wales, some of them, the New South Wales HSC, so we get boxes of these books to give out to the students. And then these are the other ones that you can access, and you can purchase them through any purchasing office as well. They don't come out, they don't print them until right at the end of July, so they're very current, and the students love to have them in their hand. They have all the different enter scores. Another couple of books that I brought along for process are these ones, and you're welcome to come and take photos and someone can have them. This is a company that puts out the enter scores for every single course in Australia and New Zealand. What's really good in here is a middle section about medicine, and anything to do with allied health as well. So it's a really good little book. And this one is the Year 10 guide, because as I was talking then, I reminded myself in my head to mention that something like education, there is a move now to lift the levels. And so you do need to be mindful that the Australian university systems are looking at changing some of the prerequisites and lifting some of the levels of mathematics for teaching, for example. I would call a band 4 that used to be, now the students have to get a band 5 to go in both mathematics and English to go into teaching, for example. So just be a bit mindful and check out these books with what the prerequisites and assumed knowledge are. So the kids can go directly through UAC International, and on the Kahoot I put what makes an international student, what makes a domestic student. A domestic student is a person that's got PR in Australia, that's a New Zealand citizen or an Australian citizen, okay? And so anyone else needs to apply through an international. One of the things that we were talking about before we went in was if a student goes down and goes into a high school in Australia, and then they're treated slightly differently because they're on the ground doing, say, an international baccalaureate or a a curriculum in Australia, a state curriculum, and then they are different. They can apply in a different way as an international student, okay, as they're going in to the university. So it pays just to contemplate that, because that could be an option for some of your students. It also gives them that opportunity to settle into Australia before they go into a big open university. Okay, many of the, how am I doing for time quickly? Many of the universities will advertise the IB scores, and I pulled out a guide for IB students going to Australia institutions. So they will, if you go onto their websites, they list now all the IB scores. And some of the institutions, if you build a rapport with them, will actually accept the predicted grades. Once you've been going through the IB for 4 or 5 years and you establish a relationship with a liaison person, and they are aware of your data, they've seen that you're predicting well and that the students are coming through going well, they will actually accept on a predicted. But that's a university by university case. Okay? And you will find in all of the books I've mentioned tables like this that will give you the scores. So you've got the different ATARs. The ATAR is the enter score. The only state that doesn't have an ATAR is Queensland, and they run with an OP system. They are going to fall into line, I believe, in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. If I haven't recalled that, I'm sorry. But it is, they are going to come into line and have an ATAR. At the moment, their OP, a 1 OP correlates with a 99.9 ATAR. When the students apply, they can apply for different numbers of courses. So they could apply to different universities within their, and this is particularly for the domestic students as well. They can apply for up to 12 courses in Victoria, 9 in New South Wales and 6 in the other states. Lots of scholarships and prizes available, and you do have to go university by university to have a look at those. There's some examples on here that you can have a look at. Accommodation, I'm going to leave that one to the next 2 speakers to talk about, but in this PowerPoint you'll find some links to those. And finally, some useful websites that you can access. But please feel free to come and talk to me afterwards if there's any points you want clarification on. So that ends my bit, which is the process part. And what I want to do now is hand over to Abiza. And I've lost my piece of paper. But I think I can do this. Abiza's, he can also introduce. Can do that, yeah. But while I'm talking, Abiza is not only a graduate from Australia, but he represents Macquarie University. So he's got an interesting perspective that he's going to share with you and talk about the unique challenges that face students who do move down to Australia. Thanks, Abiza.
Right. Thanks, Rhonda, and good morning, everyone. I went to Australia actually in 2001 as an international student over there, and I actually studied in India, in Bombay. I did my schooling and my undergraduate education in India itself before going for a master's degree to Australia. Now, I think one of the reasons why at that time I chose Australia was mainly curiosity. All of my friends went to the US or the UK or wherever they went, but they all went to the same places. And one of the reasons I chose Australia was really more about curiosity and finding out more about this country down under. So just starting with a bit of my experiences over there. One thing I picked up immediately when I was in Australia, which I didn't know when I went from here, was the amount of diversity within Australia, within the classrooms, within the students, within the faculty. Incredible amount of diversity over there. So in my classroom itself, I was told I was amongst 5 international students in a class of 50. And I thought there was quite a few. I mean, there wasn't too many international students. But when I actually went to class, I realized that the classroom itself was extremely diverse. I could tell there were people from Africa, from India, but who had all been born and brought up in Australia itself. So an incredibly diverse country from the classroom level, from the teachers level as well. The other aspect to the universities I found compared to India, where in most universities in India you'll find that they're very secluded, highly security kind of locations where only the students or the teachers can enter with an ID card or something of that sort. But Australian University is actually part of the community. So they're actually public universities where you can enter, you can use the facilities there. On weekends they become, their parking lots become into farmers markets, all kinds of things happening on their campus itself. So it's really a part of the community, the university campuses, and they aren't really kind of a secluded environment in which only students are allowed. The other aspect about Australia, which was different, I found, was accommodation. And most of the accommodation on in Australian universities is actually off campus. Most universities can't take all their students on campus itself. So what Australian universities offer is a variety of options for students to go and live somewhere else around the campus itself. And one option which I took up when I was there was actually living with an Australian family while I was doing my degree. And what happens, as I mentioned before on the previous slide, is that university campuses are part of the community. And what happens around those campuses is that a lot of people actually open up their houses for students to come and live with them. So it's an incredible experience because if you're living with them as a member of their family, the amount of learning, language learning, cultural learning that happens in that time which you're with them is just incredible. So the popular name for it is called a homestay, and that's where most, I would say, a lot of students do take up that option, especially if they're looking to improve their language abilities as well. So it's actually quite a diverse form of accommodation available. There's also a lot of accommodation around the campus which is privately rented out to you for a lease of 1 year or 2 years, depending on what your needs are as well. But in case you do have students going to Australia, and if they're undergraduate as well, the homestay is an incredibly strong experience for students because they really get to know Australians and Australian culture quite well. The other thing I realized very quickly in Australia was you couldn't hold a conversation with anyone unless there was something about sport involved. And as soon as they realized that you were from India, it was about cricket, and it was about players, about the level of detail was just incredible, which they came out with. So Australians love their sport. It's a sporting culture which comes out in all their conversations when they talk to you. They also play some really unique sports like the Australian rules football. And since I was based in Melbourne, which is the home of Australian rules football, you couldn't get away from it. There were entire families who were attached to a particular team who did everything or attended all their matches right throughout the entire season. Finally, I'll talk a bit more about Australian employers, and I think this is kind of an important slide because a lot of students who go overseas obviously are looking for strong career outcomes as well. And what I found in Australia, even now, is even more attractive now, is that, as Tom mentioned, that the economy is extremely strong right now. So they've had 25 years approximately of a very stable economy and good, say, job data coming out of Australia currently. The Australian government currently offers a 2-year work permit. As long as you stay within Australia and do a course of a certain length, they allow you to stay back and work for 2 years. That allows you to work anywhere in terms of you don't have to find a job in your field or in your area. You can actually work in any field you like. Australian employers are becoming more and more aware about these kind of visas which are available to students and are looking to take on students as well. And a lot of you may ask, what happens after 2 years? Employer sponsorship is one category where a lot of employers look to keep back their best students and their best staff by actually sponsoring their visa for a longer duration as well. The other aspect to the Australian work culture as well is that I mentioned the previous slide about sport, and you can see sport actually coming out in their corporate culture as well. There's a very strong focus on teamwork. Teamwork's really, really important for them. The work culture is really important for them. It's very normal to be asked about sport in your interview as well, as to which sport you play or which sport you follow. So there's some very strong overtones of sport coming into Australian employment as well, which I thought is very interesting as well. Australian employers also really value multiculturalism. They actually have policies in place where they're keen to attract people who come from diverse backgrounds, who come with different kinds of talents from different countries to come and study with them as well. So I've had a very, very positive experience because I worked for almost 10 years in Melbourne with an Australian employer, and had a very, very positive experience with them as well. So that's my kind of 2 cents on Australia, and just kind of confirming what Tom and Rhonda said before as well. But absolutely a great experience for me, and I would recommend it to all your students to consider Australia as an option. And I think a lot of you are, have students who are looking at the US or the UK and those kind of markets as well. But I think Australia has something quite different in terms of experience, which a lot of your students may like to consider as well. Choosing universities which match your the kind of program they want to go for is really important. I think Rhonda touched upon that as well, that look at the broader range of universities beyond the very popular ones, of course, which are more suited to your students and match their their interests as well in terms of the course they want to do. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. And finally, in our short panel before we open up to Q&A, and I introduce you to the other 3 Australian representatives here. Amit from UNSW. He represents UNSW, but he represents a lot more because he has family in Australia who are still studying and involved, and he himself is a graduate of Australia. So over to you.
My daughter actually went to Sydney to study, and that was the first real exposure that I had to Australia, apart from stories about Bradman and the others. And thereafter, I had the opportunity to go and serve in Sydney as the Indian Consul General. And I was there for about 3.5 years. It was a period in which I had a very intense relationship with the universities and other academic institutions, particularly in South Australia and New South Wales, which were part of my jurisdiction. There were a number of things that I thought I was going to tell you today, but I'll just pick up a few things that Tom and Rhonda and Abhizer have said and try and sum it up. One of the very interesting recent developments is that the power, as we understood it in global affairs, is shifting. And that shift really is taking a dramatic turn from what we grew up with, Europe and North America, to the Asia Pacific. It's ASEAN, it's China, it's Australia, it's possibly India, and most certainly parts of the Gulf countries, where a shift is going to take place. Now, this shift automatically means that an engagement not just on diplomatic or other areas, but on economic and commercial areas is going to intensify. Education then is going to play a fundamental role in the way we create the next generation of students. Now, when you look at the next generation, there's something that Tom had said to me once, which I've never been able to forget, which is that as a parent and as teachers and educationists, the biggest puzzle we face is that our kids are going to do a job that has not yet been created. That job doesn't exist. And therefore, the role of education has to fundamentally transform itself. There's an article that's been carried in yesterday's issue of the Harvard Business Review. And it says that only those companies will survive which can make products which are not yet anticipated. You have to create a different kind of need in order to be able to adjust to a changing world. And this, to my mind, is embodied critically in the kind of work that is being done in Australian universities. Let me just pick up very briefly on something that Abhizer said on diversity. One of the most critical path-making researches that are going on across the globe, where one of the Australian universities is actually a world leader, is to take rubber tires waste product, garbage, and to convert it into steel. It's called green steel. You can Google it. And the person who runs that program is an Indian. If you take another university, which is also based in Sydney, one of the great works that they do is on robotics. The person who heads that is from Vietnam. Among the universities in South Australia, the head of the creative English and the mathematics department is the Nobel Prize winner, John Kedzie, who comes from South Africa. This extraordinary mix of people being drawn from different parts of the world who have actually taken Australian universities, Australian culture, Australian thinking, and inserted in it the game changer in my mind, innovation. And to my mind, Australian universities reflect critically the ability, as someone said, to think different. But thinking different by itself doesn't work. Innovation is not just the ability to think different. Innovation is the ability to be able to think different and to get it into the marketplace. That's what Tom was talking about when he mentioned Google Maps. Today you accept Google only because you use it. Otherwise, innovation doesn't work. Whether you look at Cochlear, one of the universities is a world leader on that. It's an Australian university. Across the board, this embrace of innovation, this conversion of an idea into something that would be needed in the future is what Australian universities reflect. I'll end by just saying one thing. Somewhere around November 2010, I had discussions with some people who wanted to know how Australia could enter into the Indian psyche. We had a long talk and then they entered the Indian market in 2012. The rest is history, because that one single program, to my mind, embodies Australia. That program is called MasterChef. MasterChef, if you think about it, is not only engaging, which is what Australia is. It is the search for extraordinary talent. Because when you watch it, you are driven to want to do it. And at the same time, you realize it's not easy, but it can be done. MasterChef also embodies diversity. It embodies professionalism. It embodies the fact that it doesn't matter where you come from or what your background is, it can be done. I'd recommend Australian universities for multiple reasons. And I'll end by saying that one of the biggest reasons is that my daughter, who did a course over there, would tell me every morning that she wanted to go back to university. And there's no better way of accepting that education can be interesting. Thanks.
Shut the lid on here. Thank you so much, Amit. And thank you to Abiza and to Tom. And I do hope that that's given you a really wonderful perspective on Australia. There is so much that is happening down under, and it's well worth, as you've heard, having a look. Now, not only do we have the three wonderful speakers that we've got today, but we've got, as I said, other representatives in the room. I think many of you will have met Belinda. Could you just wave? Belinda's up here. She's representing INSEARCH, which is a great, and she's been in the path, you just did the pathways. Yeah, would you like to just?
I'm actually part of the University of Technology in Sydney. My focus is on the pathway, which is the entry for those international undergraduate students. And I'll in fact be doing the presentation just after lunch.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Which is not a great time to do a presentation. So I'm really hoping to drum up a little bit of support and I'm interested in knowing more about Australia and how to get
By the way, the robotics program is done
at
UTS.
UTS, yeah.
Thank you, Amit.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. And we've got Don Whitford over here who represents, you heard if you played the Kahoot, University of...
Southern Cross University.
Okay.
So, hi everyone. Most of the people in the room I've met. If I haven't met anyone, please make sure you get... If you've got not my card yet, please make sure you get it. I have on my computer some generic information for you to give to you, given the time constraints that we've got here. So if we cover things in questions, and you want some more information, my computer's on, that you can come and do something with anyone in the room. And I've got a few things open that I can show you to help out things. But you should know also, most of you, I'm not sure whether you know that Indian population in Australia is the 4th largest and growing because of you. And we welcome more to do that. But when I show that to my own university, and that's the reason I meant it, the ignorance level of people in Australia may be understanding that in my own group of maybe 50 to 100 people I showed a slide to, some of them don't understand that things have changed as fast as it has. And I welcome that change, as we've all talked about, and I think this is something you should understand as how positive it is.
And we've got Bela as well. And I've just found my bit of paper with our surnames, so excuse my informality as I just introduced everybody then. Bela represents the hospitality area, really, and a lot of other things as well. Would you like to stand up and
Sure. So I represent the non-considered elementary school. It's really niche. So it's not so much I can speak on Australia as everybody else has, but I can speak on hospitality in Australia. So if you have questions about hospitality in particular, happy to answer.
And at this point, we'd like to open the floor to questions. I know Tom had a few that... Oh, sorry, I forgot. Ken, I'm sorry. I did say to wait. I forgot. Ken Silburn's with us as well. And he's from a high school in New South Wales, and some of you will have heard him speak yesterday, a head of science and a wonderful educator. Would you like to introduce a bit more?
Thank you. I actually don't represent anybody, so I feel out of place. Can I actually thank Tom though? I've actually here on 5. I'm actually here for almost, this is my 5th week, just going to schools and running workshops with teachers and with students. So my background is in teaching, and one of the things I know everybody here is looking at universities, but there's Rhonda actually pointed out one point. There's a big, or it's an easy way to actually get into a university in Australia is to actually do Year 11 and Year 12 as a student for the high school certificate. And that way you actually get an ATAR, and that way you can slide straight into a university very, very easily. The other thing which I suppose I might represent is students, and when I look at Indian students and Australian students, there's no difference. They all love to learn, and I've just found that from every single school. But one thing which is probably important for India is the difference in the average age of the workforce. So in 2020, I think the average age in India I think it's going to be 29, as compared to other countries like Australia, which will be about 35. And so at that point, there's going to be a lot of need for a workforce. And one of the things I think, if you get the chance to get to Australia or to any other country, then that's where there's going to be a global workforce, and that's where you'll be needed, and that's where the jobs will be. So I'd like to welcome people to Australia. Thanks, Rhonda.
My apologies, Ken,
Thank you.
again. So please feel free to ask questions of any one of us in the panel. Over to you. The ATAR.
Scary.
So the ATAR is a very difficult... The ATAR is a very difficult thing to measure. Students in school do 5 or 6 subjects. They must do 6 in their year 11 year, six subjects, and they have to have, for their ATAR, English plus 4 others. And they get two scores. They'll get a board of, in New South Wales, for example, or in Victoria, they'll get a board mark for their subject. Then those subjects are all put together. And quite seriously, you have to be a very high-level actuarist to be able to work out the ATAR. It's very complicated. But you can go online to UAC or VTAC, one of these places, and actually download some material very easily. Go to the publishing area, and you can download booklets on all about your ATAR and how it's calculated. Right? So they give weightings to different subjects. There are, for example, in New South Wales, there are 4 different levels of mathematics, and each subject gets 2 units, unless it's an extension subject, and then they get a one unit. And so potentially students can do up to 13 units. Some might add on, and then only 10 of those will be used to calculate that ATAR. So they get 2 measures. They get a score for their Board of Studies, which is their high school certificate, and then they get an enter score into university. Good ATAR might be the next question. What's a good ATAR? Generally something, and my colleagues might agree or disagree, but most of the students are looking at getting over 80 to get into a reasonable course. Now, if you have a look at, I don't think I put it in but on my profile document, there is a correlation as well, if you go to the IB, with the IB scores and the ATARs. So about a 35 IB score would correlate with around a 92 ATAR, right? And a 24 IB score would be somewhere around a 70, and there and in between. So there, but it's in my book here if you want to have a look and take a photo. Does that answer the question? Is there?
Yeah, that's the question. And I guess you said also about predicted grades, you have to build up a rapport. So what do they consider before you have that rapport?
What would I consider?
Well, what
the
would an
report.
Australian
Okay.
university consider?
So yeah, you can talk to that one. Yeah.
We actually, the university I work for, we accept predictive scores, so we don't have to build a rapport in there. So we officially accept your predictive score into IB. So, and most Australian universities are moving in that direction as well. So it's quite actually easy to get in here. So.
One of the universities is they want our 4 years of data. So as soon as they get our schools 4 years of data, to show that we've predicted reasonably well and that they're happy. A lot of them have got our students in there. Once you've got a few students at the university and they see how they're flourishing, then they're very open. So.
Rhonda, can I just add and give her support for everything she's doing? My background's a Director of Studies in 2 private schools in Australia and a career development person just like you are here. So even though I carry the badge at the moment of a Southern Cross University, please, I can assist and later on for the rest of the day and assist you, because it's a minefield and it's an individual question, an individual answer for all your concerns. We can't run through every ATAR that a university course would do, good, bad, average, whatever. That would take so long. But please, ask as many questions, but we might not be able to be exact answers and take up a lot of time with that, I wouldn't think, right now, because I know there's so many other questions people would do. Is that okay, Rhonda, if I...
I just wanted to say that with the question of ATAR, so coming to basics, what's an ATAR? So that's a domestic score for domestic students in Australia. In Australia, every state has a different curriculum, which is kind of with an umbrella Australian curriculum. If you're studying in New South Wales and you want to apply in Perth, you will need an ATAR score if you want to go across states as well. So that's why it's kind of an Australian score, which is also accepted internationally. So if you want to go internationally, ATAR score accepted as well, like an IB score. So it's fundamentally, for example, if you do an SSC here and you want to go and apply in Delhi, you can't do that, or you can't convert it some sort of way. So ATAR becomes a common denominator across Australia. So not everybody, you have to apply for it, for an ATAR score, or you get it automatic, I think, after year 12. automatic after year 12 as well. Yes, it's kind of fundamental.
And very often in the university reps will affirm this, the international students can be up to a few points lower than a domestic student. So when you look at some of the books that have got the ATAR score in it, they'll publish a score, but that's for a domestic student.
Do we have any more questions? Because I might actually talk a little bit more about ATAR, if that's there. I actually teach in a school which is a low socio-economic school. So we have a lot of parents that don't have a lot of money. But the ATAR is, I just love it because it means that regardless of the course that a student does, whether it's physics, chemistry or biology, or whether it's textiles or whatever, they get a mark on how they rate compared to other students of the same ability. So it's one of the equalisers. So if a student works really hard at a subject, they get the marks that they actually deserve. It's a wonderful process. Yeah.
And just building on, I'll go back round to the mic. There were two things I did miss out that I was racing along. I was very conscious of trying to get to have the timing right for this presentation, and I think we've just about hit the mark. But in respect of applying, the third thing that I did miss out was the agents. And as a counsellor, I'm just as wary and aware of what happens within the agent area, but sometimes they are useful in terms of the visa aspect. Okay, and when you're sending, say, your predicted scores on a transcript, and trying to predict some of the scores that you do have, it is really important to be very knowing about the agents that you're using. And that's why sometimes it's good to do that liaison link up so that you feel confident about sending that on. It is just about a score in Australia. So you might have been sitting there saying, why isn't she talking about a personal statement or referees or references and that sort of thing? It is all about, this number is quite crucial. It's the selling point. That doesn't mean that the kids can't be people. And I often advise my students, of course, when the liaisons come, to demonstrate their interest, talk to the people. And then when they apply, there is an aspect to it about them becoming a person as well.
Rhonda, I have to just butt in, sorry. For me, it's not just about a score. There are interviews. If you don't pass the interview, or if you are not interested, you have not been counselled by everyone in this room properly, parents agree the whole point, I have to fail the student. This is tough. It's part of the visa, attendance, etc. It's a little bit of a minefield. I know Blue Mountains, and my history is working for Blue Mountains, so I know Bela. And the interviews are very important for some particular courses, but in general, the mark is what you get until you get interviewed, if I use it in that terminology, that's all. But there are some particular ones, is that okay? I can see Bela over here nodding.
And going in line with that, there are obviously for medicine, and this isn't a presentation about specific areas, that's why we tried to keep it general, but you would be looking at a UMAT and or a STAT if the students have been out of school for a while. An IMAT, the International Medical Test, or a STAT, which is a special test that you would do, and they're on the ACES site. So there are lots of specifics that I didn't go into today. But I think that just about wraps it up, and feel free, as I said, to come and talk to any one of us. Okay? Thank you so much for your attention today.
Thank you.
Of the IC3 Advisory Committee and Planning Committee, thank you all. I really love Australia, and I wish you could get back to the rafters, back to India. The TV series isn't coming back, and I'm very upset about it. So that's my request to you, Tom. Please try to do something about it. And